History remembers kings, queens, and warriors, but some names survive for darker reasons. Among the castles of Hungary, one figure stands apart: a noblewoman whose wealth was unmatched, whose power was immense, and whose reputation became legend. She would be remembered not for rule, but for terror. Her name, Elizabeth Báthory. A maid scrubs at the cold stone floor, her hands trembling as blood seeps into the cracks, stains that will never wash away. Behind her stands Countess Elizabeth Báthory, silent in her crimson robe. She lifts her fingers, smears the blood across her skin, as if anointing herself with youth itself. What would you sacrifice to stay young forever? For Elizabeth, the answer was everything: her wealth, her soul, and the lives of countless innocent girls. They called her the Blood Countess. But was she truly a monster, born of cruelty, or a pawn in a far darker game of power and propaganda? If this is the type of content you enjoy watching, please give us a quick like and follow. Stay tuned while we uncover the Blood Countess for who she really was. Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 into one of Hungary's most powerful families. Her relatives were kings, bishops, and warlords, and from her earliest days, she lived in a world where violence was part of her daily life. Public executions, floggings, and mutilations were spectacles of order and justice. To noble children like Elizabeth, pain was not hidden. It was normalized. She may also have suffered from seizures, a condition at the time treated with remedies that blurred medicine and superstition. One so-called cure required the blood of peasants to be smeared across the lips of the afflicted. For a moment, imagine a child convulsing while crimson was pressed onto her mouth. To Elizabeth, blood entered her life not as a horror, but as ritual, and cruelty was not discouraged. Noble children were often urged to punish servants, to test their obedience, and to learn dominance. Elizabeth grew up believing that power meant control, and that control was proven through fear. At 10, she was engaged to Ferenc Nadasdy, heir to another mighty Hungarian family. At 15, she married him. As part of the alliance, she received Countess Castle, a looming fortress in the Carpathian Mountains. From its icy halls, history would begin to write her darkest chapter. Ferenc Nadasdy was feared across Europe as the Black Knight, a warrior notorious for brutality on the battlefield. Their marriage was not born of love, but of politics, binding two colossal bloodlines. While Ferenc fought wars, Elizabeth ruled the estates. She commanded servants, oversaw farms, and gave orders to soldiers. But whispers soon spread. Punishments in her castle went far beyond discipline. A servant was beaten until she collapsed. Another locked in a freezing room overnight for spilling wine. Villagers murmured that the Countess didn't just correct mistakes. She took pleasure in suffering. Some claimed Ferenc himself taught her tortures from war. Oil set alight between toes, sharpened needles beneath nails. True or not? Her cruelty deepened after a mysterious woman entered her household, Anna Darvulia. To some she was a healer, to others a witch. To Elizabeth, she became a confidant. After Darvulia arrived, cruelty turned methodical. Punishment became a ritual. And soon, young girls began to vanish. What began as punishment transformed into experiments. Witnesses later described horrific methods. Girls stripped and drenched in freezing water, forced to stand outside until their bodies turned stiff with ice. Others were branded with irons, pierced with needles, or mutilated with crude tools. The castle shifted from what seemed like a fortress to now a torturous prison. Rooms once used for storage were now repurposed into chambers of torment. Hooks dangled from ceilings. Wooden racks groaned under strain, and muffled screams carried through stone walls. And then came the tale that would immortalize her name. A maid tugged too hard while brushing Elizabeth's hair. The Countess struck her, blood splattering across her hand. Later, after application, she believed her skin appeared to be smoother and younger. Absurd to us, perhaps, but in an age where beauty meant survival, the thought seemed plausible. If blood could heal sickness, could it also preserve youth? From then, the obsession grew. Peasant girls, lured with promises of work, never returned. Some historians claim Elizabeth kept a ledger with hundreds of names, a chilling record of all her victims. But here, myth and truth blur. The infamous image of Elizabeth bathing in blood never appeared in trial records. It surfaced only after her death, in sensational pamphlets. Yet multiple witnesses swore she smeared blood on her skin as if it were medicine. Bathtub or not, the pursuit was the same. Youth, stolen from the lifeblood of the young. Why wasn't she stopped sooner? You might be asking. Because her victims were peasants. To the nobility, their lives were disposable. Servants later described unspeakable acts. A girl's mouth sewn shut with horsehair. Another bitten until chunks of flesh were torn away. Others frozen or flayed alive. Some claimed Elizabeth laughed while crippled victims crawled across the floor, their legs smashed for disobedience. Yet these horrors were all ignored. Priests heard rumors. Villagers spoke in whispers. But as long as the dead were nameless daughters of the poor, Elizabeth was untouchable. Even her closest aides complied out of terror, helping lure victims, clean chambers, and burying corpses. But her protection cracked when she turned from peasants to noble blood. The daughters of aristocrats began to disappear. Nobility could ignore peasants, but not their own. Silence fractured, and the weight of rumor grew too heavy to contain. By the year 1610, the king himself could not ignore it. Matthias II owed Elizabeth vast debts. Her downfall would not only silence scandal, but also erase what he owed. The man sent to confront her was Palatine Gheorghe Thurzo, both royal official and distant relative. He collected testimonies from villagers, priests, and terrified servants. Over 300 accounts in total came to surface. The evidence was overwhelming. Mutilated bodies, shallow graves, witnesses who swore she inflicted torment to them with her own hands. That December, Thurzo led a raid on Countess Castle. What he claimed to find was a scene of horror. Elizabeth surrounded by dying girls, one body still warm, blood fresh on the floor. In a letter to the king, he declared, "I have captured the infamous Lady Bathory, red-handed." Her servants were swiftly tried and executed, but Elizabeth herself was never given a trial, nor allowed to defend herself. Because if she spoke, what might she reveal? Other nobles who joined her games? Daughters delivered willingly? Secrets the crown all wanted buried? Her silence was not mercy. It was politics. Elizabeth was confined to her own castle, bricked into her chambers, windows sealed shut. She lived her final years in isolation until her death in 1614. But her story did not end there. It grew. Soon after, pamphlets and plays spread lurid tales. of a countess who filled bathtubs with virgin's blood, who drained entire villages to preserve her beauty. These details were absent from the original records, but flourished in the imagination of Europe. Why, you might be asking? Perhaps symbolism. Blood as the ultimate image of vanity and cruelty. Or perhaps propaganda, a convenient way to erase her family's influence and seize their wealth. Demonize Elizabeth, and no one would protest when her estates were taken. Regardless, the legend eclipsed reality. She became more than a criminal. She became a monster of folklore, compared to vampires, witches, and even demons. Her image bled into horror stories that endure to this day. Yet beneath the exaggeration lies undeniable truth. Scores of young women vanished into her castle, and many never emerged. Whether she sought beauty, power, or simple domination, her reign left behind scars that could not be explained away. Elizabeth Báthory's name endures not just as a noblewoman, but as a legend of horror. History brands her a sadist who slaughtered hundreds. Yet history was written by those who profited from her fall. Was she truly the most prolific female killer in history? Or was she a pawn in a ruthless game of power, with her crimes twisted until she became something larger than life? Her victims are long gone. Her voice was silenced, and now all that remains is a question. When you hear the name Elizabeth Báthory, do you see a woman or a monster? If stories like these interest you, please feel free to give us a like and subscribe so that we can continue to create more captivating content like this. More importantly, let us not become like the people from the past who looked away and said nothing out of fear. No one should fall victim to any kind of injustice, let alone be collateral thereof. One thing now is for sure: even a noblewoman, a countess, can portray more than one persona to the world.